So I was having a little peruse around the internet, Google Images to be specific, and I ended up looking at a bunch of photos of Drew Barrymore from the 90s. To me, when I think of classic 90s makeup, the first person that comes to mind is Drew Barrymore, and I just noticed that her makeup style was pretty much the antithesis of modern makeup, which I love. I'm all about breaking them rules. So I'm going to show you how to get that look today. Okay, let's get started. So in these photos, Drew Barrymore's face often looks quite a bit paler than her body. Not in like an unnatural way. It doesn't look weird, but there's definitely a bit of a contrast between her face and her body. So we're gonna kind of go for that look today, which I know is not something that most people would want. So if you want, you can just use a foundation that matches your body. We're not going super full coverage today, which I think is a little bit difficult for a lot of people these days because we've gotten so used to being perfectly airbrushed, if not actually airbrushed in person. I think a lot of people are used to even just like airbrushing themselves in post in Facetune or whatever. So I'm just applying the Revlon Insta Filter foundation in the shade 150 Buff, and this is pretty close to my skin tone, and with my softbox lights, my face isn't gonna look quite as pale as it does in person, but this is a little more beige than I am. My skin is almost light green. I'm like a pale olive typically, so there's gonna be a lot more contrast in person than there is on the video. This foundation on its own is relatively matte, but in the 90s people were super matte, so I'm actually going to powder this down. I'm just using a translucent powder. I'm just going to remove the excess foundation and powder from my lips because I can't stand the way it feels. So let's move on to brows. I'm just taking a clean spoolie and getting all of the excess powder and foundation out of them. So this part I am going to have to take some creative liberties with because obviously if you know anything about the 90s, you know most people had super thin eyebrows, and I don't have thin eyebrows. In this photo of her eyebrows aren't really skinny, but they're quite arched, which I also struggle with. My eyebrows are really straight, so I'm going to do my best to do a combination of the really skinny eyebrows that most normal people had and the really full fluffy eyebrows that the supermodels had. I'm using the Benefit Browsings. It has a little colored wax and a brow powder. I'm just going to use the powder side. And I'm going to use an Essence, doesn't have, oh, what is this called? The name is rubbed off. I think it's called the Precise Eyeliner Brush. It's just a really tiny angled brush. To give my eyebrows a little bit more of an arch, I am going to draw on some little hairs a little lower in the front part than I normally would, and then draw them up a little higher at the arch. And I'm just drawing in little hair strokes. So typically their brows would have been a little more filled in, like slightly more solid. Then I'm gonna draw them in, but my eyebrows are so thick, if I draw them in that solid, it's gonna look weird. They're gonna look like little blocks on my face. Again, for the outer part of the brow, I'm not going to fill it in at the bottom of the arch because that will bring the arch down too much. I'm just going to leave that part there and then just draw in a couple of little hair strokes right at the tail of the brow. So you can see that gives me a little more lift to this brow than on this one. And then I'm going to take a clear brow gel and run that through the eyebrows. So I'm going to take the wand and push all of the hairs straight up to emphasize the arch of the brow. Until I get to this outer part, I'm going to brush those hairs down. So now we have a nice little arched eyebrow without having to pluck them super thin and then worry about whether or not they will grow back in the future. So let's move on to the eyes. This might seem a little bit strange, but I'm actually gonna curl my eyelashes first before I put anything else on my eyes. For some reason, I just find it easier to curl my lashes before I put any eye makeup on. It keeps my lash curlers clean, and I just think it's a little bit easier to see what you're doing when you don't have makeup on your eyes yet, when you curl your lashes. Now I'm going to take a brown cream eyeshadow. This is Quite Natural Paint Pot from MAC. And I'm going to take that on a big fluffy brush. This is a tapered blending E35 brush from Sigma. I'm just going to take a little bit of that on the brush and gently sweep that all over the lid. And the reason that I'm choosing this is because, I mean, the name of the product is apropos. It's called Quite Natural. It's quite natural. The color of it looks like the natural shadows on your face. I'm just putting a light wash of that all over the eyelids. Not really worrying about it being perfect. This look is a little bit imperfect, and honestly, if you perfect it too much, it's just less cool. So I'm also going to take that underneath the eyes. So we have some like dark circles now, but that's what we want. Now I'm going to take another angled brush. This is a small angled E65 brush from Sigma and a black eyeshadow. This is from the Orb of Light Full Moon palette from the brand Black Moon Cosmetics. I'm going to take a little bit of the black eyeshadow, and I'm just going to put this on the outer 2/3 of the upper lash line. And again, this is one of those things, it doesn't need to be perfect, we're just going to kind of smudge it anyway. And then to smudge that out a little bit, you know what, I'm actually going to use a Q-tip. You can use a brush if you'd rather, or you can just use your finger. That works too. Whatever you prefer is what you should do. I'm going to add a little bit more after blending it out the first time, because I lost some of that opacity when I blended it out. So now the outer corner of this eye is lifted a little bit more, which also adds to that lift we were trying to get with the eyebrows. So everything is just going up. We're going up. Now, this next step is going to seem a little bit weird, but I'm actually going to add bronzer underneath my eyes. So where you would typically these days highlight under your eyes, I'm actually going to put just a touch of bronzer. I'm going to use the Sigma In the Saddle Aura powder. It's just like a nice, like, kind of pinky bronzer actually. But that works really well for my skin tone. I literally just tapped my brush in one time. I'm applying that with a powder brush. This is a brush from BH Cosmetics. You don't want to make it like super dark under here, because then it's just going to look like you have a lot of makeup on, which is not really what this look is about. If you look up Gwen Stefani in the 90s, she often has just a little bit of color under her eyes, which I think is such an interesting look. And I kind of found myself in a little bit of a Google deep dive looking at all these photos of a lot of the people who were famous at that time. You know, you can kind of see some of her freckles. We haven't had much sun here in Texas lately, so I don't have any freckles right now. So what I'm going to do is take an eyebrow marker. This is the Milani Brow Tint pen in the shade Natural Taupe, and I'm just going to draw, not a bunch, but just a couple of little freckles on to kind of mimic the look that she's got going on. And now, the most important part, the lip. I'm using Plum Lip Pencil by MAC. My natural lip shape at the Cupid's bow is super pointy, but hers is almost always rounded off. So I'm gonna try to kind of mimic that shape. And that's it. I hope you liked this video. If you did, make sure you click the like button or the dislike button. I don't really care. Just click one of them. You can also subscribe and click the bell icon if you would like to be notified when I post a new video. Follow me on Instagram at Alexa Link. It's just my name. I post a new look over there every single day. I have been posting a new look every day for about 750 days. If you have any suggestions for what you'd like to see, feel free to leave a comment below and I'll get back to you. Okay, I'll see you next time.